right, good morning. As you guys are making your way back to your seat, want to let you know that while I told you a little bit, let you crack the door a little bit into my relationship with my wife and my family, and I heard lots of like, oh man, I'm a mess sometimes though. Even though I have all those sappy moments with my beautiful, beautiful wife, when I'm on the stage, I'm ready to get down to business. As much as I love her, I also love talking about Jesus. And I've been praying for you guys for quite some time now. And my prayer has been that you will see Jesus clearly so you can follow him faithfully. I'm going to be with you for the next 4 mornings today and then 3 more after this. I'll be eating lunch and dinner in the cafeteria. I'll be hanging out here. That please, let's get to know each other a little bit. I'd love to get to know you, hear your story, and I want to know how you see Jesus clearly and follow him faithfully. So I've been praying for those and then moments in your story. I like the theme this week, don't you? The and then. I mean, every good story, including yours, has an and then moment. You know this, you just may not realize it. I'll set the scene for some stories that you know these, okay? And you, as I'm setting the scene and the and then moment, you just shout out to me what story I'm telling you, okay? So, a nerdy kid gets beat up at school, and then he was bitten by a radioactive spider. Come on, Spider-Man. An unwanted orphan lives under the stairwell. I didn't even get to the and then, and you know what it is. And then Hagrid broke down the door and brought him a birthday cake. Yeah. All right. Farm kid with big dreams was ambushed while searching for a droid. And then old Ben handed him his father's lightsaber. Star Wars, come on. Every good story has an and then moment. It has plot twists. It has, the twists and the turns, and you don't know exactly where it's going to go. And it gets to the point that the hero, the protagonist of the story, is regretting that he got himself in that situation to begin with, and then it happens for them. I believe that's your story as well. And I've been praying that this week, maybe even today of this week, you would have your and then moment. It takes big events, it takes big things to have those and then moments, and nobody knows that better than Peter. One of the characters that we're looking at this week, one of the main characters is Peter and what he had going on. And so if you got your Bibles or you got an app on your phone, turn to Matthew chapter 14. Matthew 14. We're going to look at Peter and Jesus and the water walking moment that they had together. And I do believe that this is one of his big, huge, and then moments where his story started to change. So while you're turning, I said Matthew chapter 14, it's like verse 22 is where we're going to be starting there. I'll set the scene up a little bit. Jesus had just fed the 5,000 people, plus, it was 5,000 men and all of their families. The crowds are huge there, and as Jesus is wrapping up feeding them, they decide that they want to try and make Jesus king by force. The Roman government was oppressing Israel at that time. They needed a leader, and so if Jesus could multiply bread and fish and he could draw a crowd like this, maybe Jesus can also multiply weapons and swords and we can finally overthrow the Romans. And so they wanted Jesus to be their king. Now Jesus is king, but just not that kind of a king, what they were looking for. He's a different type of king. And so Jesus wants to go up on the mountain and pray by himself. But before he did that, and if you're looking at the text there in verse 22 is where our story starts, it says that Jesus immediately pushed the disciples out on a boat. So the crowds are being dismissed. Jesus immediately pushes them out onto the boat, and he goes up on the mountainside to pray. So that's where we're at there. But what is the very first word that you see in our text today? What is it? Immediately. That word immediately is going to be repeated 3 times in this story, and it's going to be the guiding force of what we talk about today. So Jesus immediately sent his disciples out onto the boat. Now, this is interesting because if you've been in church for some time, or even if you haven't been in church, you've probably heard about the story of Jesus and Peter walking on water. And you know that there's going to be a storm that swells up, and they're going to be in the middle of this storm, and Jesus is going to come walking out to them on the storm. Why in the world would Jesus intentionally push his disciples out in a boat and knowing a storm is coming? Do you think Jesus knew? I mean, he's Jesus. Do you think he knew a storm was going to be coming? Water was nice and calm there at the beginning, but the Sea of Galilee, there's a set of mountains that are just east of that, and storms would just kind of roll off of that mountain, and very quickly on the Sea of Galilee, a storm would just raise up, and it would take fishermen by surprise. And a lot of these guys on this boat are seasoned fishermen. They know what they're doing, and Jesus sent them out in the boat, knowing they would be in harm's way. And so there they are. The bad weather rolls in. They're physically and mentally exhausted because text says that they were buffeted by the waves. They were straining at the oars. It was probably about 9+ hours that they were out there just fighting against the weather, trying to get back to shore. They were 3 to 3.5 miles away from shore, and they're feeling hopeless, like, oh, we don't know what we're going to do. And then all of a sudden, Jesus comes out to them on the water. That's our next scene. And if you look, the text, verse 27, it says Jesus immediately came out to them on the water. Jesus comes walking out to them about 3 to 6 in the morning. Now, skeptics who read this, and I've read commentaries and journal articles and stuff about Jesus walking on water, they really want to discredit this miracle. They want to. There's people out there that don't believe that Jesus is God. They thought that he was a good guy, maybe a prophet, but there's no way that he's God. And this story kind of throws them for a loop because they don't know what to do with it, because only God can walk on water and defy gravity like that and stay buoyant. And so they got to come up with something. And so I've read all kinds of theories about how Jesus got out there. One theory is that there was a cold wave that came over in the arid desert of Palestine. A cold front came in, and it froze the pond or the Sea of Galilee overnight, so that Jesus just was able to just kind of ice skate out to the disciples that were in a boat out there. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's stupid. There's another theory that there were perfectly placed rocks out on the Sea of Galilee, and so Jesus just kind of leapfrogged, played hopscotch out to the disciples out there, that he didn't actually walk on water. There's another theory, this one I call it the Jack Sparrow theory, that there was some sort of great animal, like a sea turtle, that Jesus just kind of jumped on the sea turtle and rode it out to the boat. It takes more faith to believe those ridiculous theories than it does just to believe that Jesus is God and he walked on water out to them. And so there's all these theories that roll around, but Jesus is walking out to them, but the disciples had their own theory of what happened. They see this figure coming at them, and it's 3 in the morning. They're completely swamped and tired, and so they see it coming out to them, and they think it's a ghost, and they have what I call their holy Scooby-Doo moment. You know what I'm talking about? Scooby-Doo, is that familiar? You guys seen Scooby-Doo? They're all walking around the spooky castle, they're wherever it's at, and then they have that moment that they see the ghost or the monster that's there. Shaggy says zoinks, Scooby jumps up in Shaggy's arm, they run around, there's a musical montage that's happening as they're all running away from this ghost or this monster, and that's exactly what happens to the disciples, because this figure comes out to them, and there was beliefs that ghosts would hang around where people drowned. And so they would drown, their spirit would just kind of hover around that place on the waters, and that spirit would then make the waters chaotic. So anytime there was a storm, the folk tale that went on in that day is that there was some dead spirit that was hovering over the waters, and he was making it all turbulent and stirring up chaos. So it was only natural with the storm, and you have this figure that's walking out on the water to them. They go, zoinks, it's a ghost, and they don't know what to do. And so they start straining at the oars, and immediately, Jesus says to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Now, grammatically correct, it is I. You know, that's good grammar there for Jesus, but that's not exactly what he said. If you're one that writes in your Bibles or you take notes, you can say right there next to verse 27, what Jesus says is, take courage, I am. Don't be afraid. That's literally what he says. You know the I am statement, right? I mean, it started way back with Moses at the burning bush, and as Moses was talking with God through this burning bush about going back to Egypt and confronting Pharaoh, and Moses says, who should I say sent me? You know, Egypt, they have thousands of gods. They don't know you, God. Who should I say that sent me? And he says, I don't need to explain myself to Pharaoh or to you. I am Jehovah God. Now, when Jesus says, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid, you would think that this would bring comfort to the disciples. They've been following him and they're like, oh, it's Jesus, it's our buddy. I don't think they felt that way at all. I think they were more afraid of this person being Jesus and him claiming to be God than if he was just a ghost. I think that they start freaking out even more. They have to muster their courage because when Jesus says, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. When he's saying I am, he's saying this is God walking to you on the water. I'm the one that is in control of everything. They have to muster their courage, and this Jesus, this God that's walking to them out on the water is the same God that is present in here right now. And you need to take courage. Because the I am is here, and he's coming at you, and he's coming at you hard. And it's just going to intensify with each moment, with each day. This is not Jesus, your buddy, that's walking on the water. This is not Jesus, your buddy, that's sitting in here today. This is not Jesus, your homeboy. This isn't Twitter Jesus. This isn't bumper sticker Jesus. This isn't t-shirt Jesus. This is not dancing taco Jesus. This is Jesus, God in the flesh, walking to you out on the water. And Peter starts to put this together. Immediately, number 3 is coming up. Peter, he starts putting two to two together because all the disciples are freaking out and they're going, okay, here he comes. This is God. Oh, what do we do? You know, he's going to kill us. All this storm is raging around. And here comes God. But he goes, no. He said, I am. But he also said, don't be afraid. This is Peter's divine and then moment. I see a moment of peace come over him, even though the storm is all around them. They've got this Jesus God figure coming at them, and he's peaceful. This is God, and I got to go to him. I must get out there to him. Have you ever had one of these moments of just fearless clarity that you know exactly what you're supposed to do, and you just do it? I have more moments of I see Jesus for who he is, and I know exactly what he's telling me to do, and I just don't do it. But Peter gets it right. He asked for permission to go out on the water. Notice that he didn't brag to the boys in the boat of what he was doing. He didn't, wait for their applause. He wasn't looking, for the camera of who's filming this Kingdom Worker video for me right now. There's none of that was going on. He just asked for permission, and he started walking to Jesus on the water. The only human being besides Jesus that we know of to ever walk on water. Now we know what's going to happen. We know that he's going to start to sink here in just a second. But the other 11 disciples are still sitting in the boat, aren't they? They didn't have that and then moment. They're still freaking out because this is a ghost or God or whoever it is walking to them, and there's a storm that's raging. But Peter has his and then moment. He sees Jesus for who he is, God in the flesh, walking on the water. I got to go to him. I want to see if I could go be with my God out on this water. So he starts out so bold and so brave, and he's totally focused on Christ. And now, all of a sudden, a wave comes crashing on a boom. The winds are blowing. And I would imagine he looks down at his feet and that he's actually stepping out, being buoyant on the water. And he just freaks out, and he takes his focus off of Christ Jesus, focuses on the winds and the waves and the water all around him, and he starts to sink. It's not just sinking, but he's starting to sink, and he's starting to drown, and he's starting to regret this moment and the situation that he's got himself into. And then he says the most powerful words in all of the text, Lord, save me. To where Peter had enough faith to get out of the boat. He had enough faith to put two and two together that this is God and start walking to him out on the water. He didn't have enough faith necessarily to withstand the winds and the waves when they're crashing down on him, but he regained his faith knowing exactly when to turn when he messes up. Lord, save me. And then that's our third immediately. Jesus reached down, grabbed him up, and they walked back to the boat together, arm in arm. I would imagine Peter did not strut back. I think Peter was a big dude. He was a fisherman. He was powerful. I don't think he strutted back going, boys, did you see me there? I think it was more Jesus picking him up, putting him back in the boat, and him, all right, come on, Peter, one leg after another, and getting him up in the boat, helping him out that way. And then, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Now, this isn't, we can't read tone of voice, we can't understand all of that coming out of the Bible text, but I highly doubt this was judgmental Jesus going, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Lightning bolt or something on him. I think it was more like, buddy, what happened? You were doing so great. You had one foot in front of the others. You were locked eyes with me. You saw me clearly. I called you out onto the water. What happened? You had little faith. Why'd you doubt me? Next time, let's get it right. Let's do this. Now, hopefully you're not blind to what God is trying to do and communicate in this text. Our personal story naturally gravitates towards Peter, doesn't it? That's what our story does. We go, okay, yeah, I need an and then moment. I need to walk on water like that. But if you're paying attention to the immediatelys that are in the text, it says immediately Jesus, immediately Jesus, immediately Jesus. 3 different times it puts those two words together there, that Jesus is hearkening our attention to the main character in the story, and it's himself. It's not necessarily about Peter, it's about Jesus. Peter gets to enter into Jesus' world. Most people don't get to enter into the dangerous, exciting, miraculous world of walking on water. But he was invited into that, but the focus is still on Jesus. Immediately, Jesus sends us out into the chaotic world. Immediately, Jesus identifies that he is the great I am and has the power over any crisis, anything that you are trying to do. And immediately, Jesus uses that power to reach us with our drowning hearts, an unfocused faith, and set our feet again. This is your and then moment. And I want to know, where is the and then moment in your story? What's the plot twist? That might just depend on who you're looking at. So I would imagine most of us in here, we're looking at ourselves for that and then moment. We're looking to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Many people in here, if you've been to multiple Move conferences, you might be making the mistake of thinking that your and then moment comes as you jump from one CIY high to the next CIY high. This is not a drug for you to abuse. This conference is meant for the body of believers to get together and worship and celebrate and help one another out. But your and then moment doesn't come from jumping from one high to the next. Your and then moment is going to come from locking eyes with Jesus and steadily walking towards him. He is Lord over the chaotic waters, and he's calling you to step out. You of little faith, why do you still sit here in the boat? Maybe you need to open up your eyes to see Jesus clearly, because your life is not as good as your social media portrays it. You're masking and hiding the reality that you're sinking in a storm. You have no idea where to turn. And have you asked Jesus to save you? Have you just asked that? I'm not talking about the first time that you asked him, and you were baptized into water. If you've done that, if you haven't done that, you should probably start there and talk to him. But have you asked Jesus to save you again? I'm not talking about eternally, but just out of the situation that you're in. And most of us, when we do that, our prayers reflect that we want Jesus to pull us out of this situation, whether it's a bad relationship or debilitating illness or something bad that happens in school, or Lord, save me because I'm not making good grades, but I need to get a scholarship. We've been hurt, we've been broken, we've been bruised. Lord Jesus, make me happy. And if you notice, when Peter starts to sink and Jesus pulls him out of the water, he does not stop the storm. The storm is just raging around still. Why didn't, when Peter starts to sink, Jesus goes, okay, God, that's enough. That's enough. Let's stop the storm. Let's calm all the waters. Let's calm this situation down and get him back into the boat so I could teach him. No, the storm still raged on. Peter just had to figure out who to reach out to for help. He had to figure out who was in control. He wasn't in control. Jesus is the one that was in control. And so his story had to take that turn of reaching out and calling out to Jesus when the situation got bad. But Jesus will not always pull you out of a bad situation in a storm. Our identity gets wrapped up in what we see in the mirror, or our athleticism, or our friends, or what's in the medicine cabinet, or whatever we've got going on at school, whatever drama or extracurricular involved with a band or sports, whatever it might be. But don't forget, Jesus knows that a storm is coming, and he's going to send you out into it because he wants you to see him clearly. You need to see Jesus clearly so you can follow him faithfully. You are not in control. You are not in control. He is. The question is do you want to follow him? Do you see him clearly enough that he's leading you into a place that you do not want to go? It may not make you happy. It may not make you popular. It may not make you rich. It may not make you, the most fun person in the room, but it's where you need to go. Out onto the water. We ask Jesus to come into our world. No. He's asking us to come into his world. And it's always more dangerous. It's always more frightening. It's always going to stretch our faith, and it's exactly where you need to be immediately. He knew that the storm was coming. He knew the storm is too big for Peter, and it was too big for you. But it is not too big for him. Is some aspect of your story just flying out of control? Have you been in the middle of a storm, or maybe lots of different little storms? Okay, look to him. The lesson here is not when the storms of life knock you down, just get back up, suck it up, Sally, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps so you could just keep on forging on in life, mighty and powerful. No, the point of the story is actually you're weak, he's not. The lesson is that the storm, when it knocks you down, it cannot knock you out because your eyes are fixated on the one who controls each and every situation and every storm of life. My faith will not give way to fear. My faith just isn't going to give way to the fear of the winds and the waves or whatever the situation is that we have going on outside of these walls and the safe protective boundaries of move. When you go back out there, the storms are waiting for you. You cannot face it on your own because you are not in control. Jesus is the one in control. And come hell or high water, my God, my Jesus treads on both of those things. And hell cannot overtake you, nor any storm or situation that the Lord has put you in. He wants you to see him and expand your faith so you could follow him faithfully, come hell or high water. Jesus treads on both. Do you see him? Then go to him.